Are you looking for inspiring conversations about faith, film, and life? You're in the right place. Here's the host who knows the right questions to ask, Father Edward Looney.
Hey everybody, it's Father Edward. Welcome back to another episode of Hey everybody, it's Father Edward, where we have conversations, and we have lots of different types of conversations. Conversations with authors, with people in the film industry, in Hollywood and such. And then I love having conversations about faith and devotion with individuals and how that looks for them and what characterizes their faith and devotion. So today, not selling you a book, not promoting a movie, just having a regular conversation. And those are some of my favorite episodes. And I think they're probably your favorite episodes too. Today, I am speaking with Bree. And a lot of people maybe are familiar with Bree because if they're on social media, if they're on Twitter, Bree was one of the converts that came to the church at the Easter Vigil. But her story is a great story of conversion and change of life, embracing the church. And she's going to share more about that past, but also now the freedom that she experiences living her faith as a Roman Catholic. And so very grateful that she has agreed to join me today to share her story with all of us here on this podcast. So thanks so much, Bree, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Father Looney. It's an honor to be here, and I'm just grateful to be a witness, to tell my story, and have a great conversation.
Yeah, one of the things, and maybe this has been your experience with social media, is that sometimes, it kind of just throws people into your feed. It could be that certain people are liking something. Even now, that's changed on Twitter, so I don't know what that all looks like now, but they could like it, and because someone liked it, it gets in my feed. I might not follow the person, but then I'll see it. I'm like, okay, I think I want to see this person's content. And I think I saw that you were tweeting some things about the Blessed Mother, who happens to be an object of my specialization in theology, and just one who's that I promote devotion to, of course. And so somehow I came across you on social media, but then started learning the story behind your social media profile and such. And it's a beautiful story of grace. And I think a lot of people have been touched. A lot of people have been moved by it. So maybe just for starters, you convert to the faith, but obviously you have to leave something behind. So what was that which you were leaving behind in order to step forward then in faith and enter the RCIA process?
So for the past 10 years, I've been a producer of pornography. And really, it my what I left behind and my separation from God really began pretty much in college. I was raised Lutheran. I was active in my youth group. I went to church every Sunday. I felt like I had a, pretty good relationship with God. And then I went to college, and that all kind of fell behind. I, I just was drinking a lot, promiscuous, leading such a reckless lifestyle. And from there, um, I talk a lot about how every person is born with this God-sized hole in his or her heart. I actually got that from Nicholas de la Torre. And I think that that's really significant. If you think of, every civilization has worshiped some sort of creator. And um, and even if it's not a God type of or an idol, you're filling that hole with something else. And for me in college, I just started filling that hole with, destructive attention, promiscuity, reckless activities, drinking, drugs. And from there, my relationship with Christ basically shrunk down to nothing. And, I would pray every now and then when I needed something, when I wanted something from him. And other than that, I just pretty much fell away from him. Our relationship deteriorated. And in that state, it was really easy for me to make poor decisions. And at that time, I had received a message. I was essentially recruited into this world of pornography. And the woman reached out, she explained what it was that she did based on like other things that I had posted about my reckless lifestyle, about my drinking, about, just being like the center of attention. She said to me, I think you'd be really good at this. Which at the time I took as a compliment. And I realize now, it's really not, it's not saying much that, or maybe it is, it's saying a lot that she thought that I would be really good at being a narcissist who, had power and control and just lived, based on pride and narcissism. And that's really where I was for the past 10 years. And I didn't think of it as anything wrong. A lot of people ask me, was there anybody in your life who suggested that your lifestyle was in some ways bad? Or was there any kind of nagging voice in the back of your mind? And no, I thought that I was living just like most of society, where I'm focused on my career, focused on my work, focused on me, what I can get from life. And now that I no longer live like that, I see that I was really unhappy. And I know I was unhappy at the time too, like constantly irritable, angry, resentful. And now that I have such a strong relationship with God, like I feel completely different. Everything's changed. I mean, just even my attitude with other people. I'm so glad to have left the old Bree behind. It's not just about the pornography. It was about the me-centered life. It was about how everything was, basically me, not just egocentric, but narcissistic, where I'll step over you in order to get what I need.
Yeah, and so, I'm just thinking that as you experience this conversion experience, there is like this in the previous life, there's the objectification. That's, what we say about pornography, that it objectifies another person. We're using that individual for our gratification, our pleasure, whatever. We're not seeing them for the dignity that they have as a child of God. And so I guess it would make sense that your relationships with other people, because as you were objectified, well, maybe you were objectifying others then as well. And
Mhm.
so as that change happens, well, that, the whole worldview, the whole perspective changes that. And so that's how you see that transformation really of the person take place, I think.
Yeah. And another thing that I kind of want to clarify, without going into too much detail, is um, pornography now is not what it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Now it's interactive, and it's designed to be hypnotic. And quite often it's from point of view. So kind of, there's not necessarily two people involved. For a lot of pornography nowadays, it's just one woman, speaking to the camera. And so I've had a lot of people who themselves were addicted to pornography or even watched my videos, and they've come to me and they've apologized, saying, I'm sorry that I objectified you in this way. And really, that's not what it is anymore. I feel like I'm the one who objectified the men who were my clients. Pornography now is considered, and it's almost kind of marketed as, it was marketed to me also as empowering. This is something where I'm dominating the viewer. I'm getting them to do whatever I want. So in many ways, I feel like it's not it's not right to accept people's apologies, or like, I just want to kind of clarify also that I never felt objectified. I was the one doing that. In many ways, I guess you could say that my my dignity, was in question, but I feel like I did that. It was my responsibility, not theirs.
Sure. No, I appreciate that insight. Obviously, as one who was kind of in that lifestyle, like you can give a different perspective because, people like me, we've been trained to say certain things, as we study this in more
Right.
theology
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
confessions, but then to hear the other perspective, I think
Yeah.
is helpful. So
Hmm.
so there comes this moment where you have a conversion then where it's almost, kind of the conversion is turning back to God. So maybe I don't know if you would characterize the time, the 10 years producing and such, if that was a time away from God. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
you were praying then or going to church at all. But
Mm-mm.
then you have that turning back moment. And from what I gather and what I've read, it seems like it took place in Italy, and maybe just being surrounded by the beauty of Catholicism and churches and saints
Got
and
it.
all that.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, what was the moment where you noticed like God is doing something in my life, and now it's up to me to cooperate with what God is doing?
Hmm. Well, specifically that moment, I think didn't occur until I got back from Italy. But it started slowly. God started slowly, through Mary, really, um, transforming my heart, and that took place in Italy. And that story kind of begins actually, about 3 years ago. Well, also to address what you said before, in the past 10 years, I occasionally went to church, but and I guess I still considered myself a Christian despite my lifestyle because of the way that I was raised, but it wasn't a regular part of my life. And then about 3 years ago, something um, really horrible happened in my life. And it was what I considered the biggest tragedy that I will probably ever go through. And at that point, it was one of those um, situations where it was just a horrible accident. And I had nobody to blame, and I had no one to turn to. And so I not only turned to, but also blamed God. And initially, I begged Jesus. I got down on my knees. I remember actually falling down on my knees, gripping my hands together so tightly that I still remember how white my knuckles were, praying so hard, please don't let this happen. Please, please don't let this happen. And he did. He let it happen. And um, at that moment, I thought to myself, you know what? We haven't had a super great relationship up until this point, but now I'm officially done. You turn your back on me, I'm going to turn my back on you, and I want nothing to do with you. And I went through life like that for about 2.5 years, and I was in I go to therapy. I speak with a therapist, and I'm slowly kind of trying to work through these things. But it's a really slow process, and I'm super mad at God. And I remember at one point, prior to Italy, I did go to church with my mother-in-law one Christmas, and I just cried the whole time because even being in a house of God, I was so upset because, again, like, he's the only one that I could possibly blame for this tragedy. So we fast forward to last spring, so about a year ago. I have the opportunity to go to Italy. And so I'm so excited. I spent about like 6 months preparing. And I decide that, when in Rome, you have the opportunity to visit the best artwork in all of the world, in my opinion, especially within Western civilization. The artwork is in Rome, in Italy. And the best place, mainly the only place to find this artwork, is in churches, in old basilicas. So that's what I spent my days doing, is visiting these churches and these basilicas. And initially it was kind of uncomfortable because I still had this, like, this is the house of God. But then again, it was like, this is more like a museum, actually. I don't have to think of it as like a place of God. I can just look at the artwork. And then I started noticing more than just the artwork. You walk into a Catholic church and the crucifix is bam, like right there in your face. God's gift to us is right there on display. We don't get that in the Lutheran church. Lutherans have like kind of an uncomfortable relationship with the crucifix. And I couldn't help but notice that. And I also couldn't help but notice that in every church I went to, not just churches, but everywhere, Mary seemed to be everywhere. And she wasn't quite like bam right in your face like the crucifix was. She was, tucked into an alcove or like a side chapel, or in Italy a lot of places they'll have what are called edicolas, and they're little murals and mosaics of Mary like up on the side of a building. And even this cafe that we visited, I noticed Mary on the barista's bracelet, and I was like, what is going on? Is this woman stalking me? And so I was like, well, if she's stalking me, then I'm gonna, get a leg up on her. And so then I started visiting these churches and like looking for her, seeking her out. And I would visit with her, and I started talking to her. I was still mad at God. I couldn't talk to God. I was still really angry, really disappointed, but I could talk to Mary. She was a human. She suffered an immeasurable tragedy, and she did it with grace and with dignity. And I mean, her heart was pierced greater than mine was. And she still not only survived, but did it with beauty. And I felt this connection to her. And from there, we had the opportunity to travel to Assisi. And mainly, I wanted to go to Assisi to see St. Francis. I talk about him as like, he's kind of like a gateway saint in a way. Like even non-Catholics know who he is. Like even before I converted, we have a statue of him in our garden. And so I've always been a really like lover of animals. So we go to Assisi to visit with St. Francis. It's fantastic, overwhelming, glorious, beautiful. But while we're there, we're also visiting with St. Clare and visiting her tomb. I had read about her, but primarily like how her story, was intertwined into St. Francis's story. She's kind of like a supporting role. And yet, when I went and I knelt before her tomb, I closed my eyes and I saw her as plain as day. She was kneeling in front of me. She had a message for me. She showed me her lap and she said, you can place her here. I'll take care of her, meaning my tragedy. You can put her here. She showed me how soft her lap was. She showed me how soft her forearms were. And she said, you don't have to do this alone. I can help you. And I just started crying. And I still, I think that I thank her to this day. I have a picture of her here. Yeah. She's my confirmation saint. I really think that she reached out to me specifically in that moment, because that's what my heart needed. It needed healing, and I wasn't going to get that from God because I was still so mad at him. And after that experience, it wasn't something that I raised up from my knees, walked out of the crypt and said, all right, I'm going to change my life. It wasn't like that. It was more of a slow burn. And I remember walking out of there and thinking, I feel lighter. I feel like maybe I can breathe a little bit more, but I'm not ready to necessarily say, okay, I'm all in, or okay, she came to me. That's it. That was what I needed. My pain and my grief is just still too much at this point. But it left a lasting impression. And from there, after I got home, some people have equated it kind of to the feelings that you have when you get home from like a pilgrimage. And I imagine it's somewhat similar. As you spent all this time, growing closer to God and experiencing this saint and being in front of her and growing closer to Mary. And then you get home and it's like, okay, now what? I still have my job and I still have all these things I need to take care of. And And so I wanted to rekindle those feelings, and I wanted to continue those feelings. And so I started going to mass, oddly enough. And,
Hmm.
I was raised Lutheran, but I got those feelings in a Catholic church. And I wasn't going to get those feelings again. I knew if I were to just, go back to a Lutheran service. And I wanted not only to rekindle the feelings that I had, but also just be surrounded by the same sort of environment, the stained glass, the huge archways. Um, and so I started going to mass, and then I started noticing more and more about, the church and the specifically the priest's view on pornography. And like, it was mentioned a couple of times during different homilies. And I started thinking, all right, well, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't go to mass and have this amazing feelings in your heart and still do what you do for work. And I also just started realizing, like, when I was working, I was like disgusted by the things that I was working on. And like, I couldn't wait to finish. And I didn't want to do it anymore. It felt gross. It felt wrong. And then I had, this nagging voice saying, you can't have it both ways. And so I decided, well, I can't have it both ways. So I'm going to choose mass. I'm going to choose Catholicism. Um, it really wasn't a hard choice. There were things that I was worried about, certainly money, my finances, how am I going to survive on, mediocre pay, versus the amount of money I was making before. Or not even, if you take out the financial equation, like, let's just try to get any kind of job. Who's going to hire me based on my resume, based on my application? Well, what have you been doing the last 10 years? Nothing, or maybe I could write down some sort of flowery euphemism, like, I'm an artistic entertainer. That's just going to lead to more questions, nobody's going to hire me. So in that way, I felt stressed and I felt trapped. But I also just felt that God was going to take care of me. By the grace of God, I was going to survive, and I probably wasn't going to make as much money as I did before. And that's okay, because again, I'm choosing God, I'm choosing Mary, and feeling better about myself, and feeling better about, what I'm putting into the world as far as work, as far as anything that I'm creating, is more important to me. That's what I learned, and what I've decided. And I mean, it's just been an incredible journey. It really has.
So this experience of Assisi, and Assisi is described as, this very peaceful place. You encounter God.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I've not been. I hope to go next year. I'll be in Rome, and so I'm hoping to make it
Oh,
to Assisi. And so, about everybody that goes there, just talks about the great sense of God's presence there. And now, there's Blessed Carlo Acutis and all this other stuff at Assisi too. So, um, so you have that experience, you start going to a Catholic mass, you realize I can't, these two things, Catholicism and what I want here and what I am receiving from God here. And this is God breaking in. He's breaking in through sin and through all of that. And then you have the lifestyle, and you're like, these two they can't be together. And
yeah.
so you leave that behind. So you tell people, probably you work with people in that industry. You say, I'm quitting. Like, what do they say? How do they take the fact that you're leaving it behind?
Well, the friends that I had and still have in the industry, oddly enough, it's kind of funny. They both reached out to me and said, I don't judge you, and I support your conversion. So I think there's two things that make me smile about that. One, that's so sweet and kind and generous of them, and I'm so grateful for that. But on the other hand, isn't that just kind of whacked that like these two porn stars are telling me that like they don't judge me for converting to Catholicism? It's like backwards. Um, and both of them, you know, are really curious about Catholicism, about prayer, about my experience, and I'm continually sharing these things with them little by little. But mainly, the most shocking thing I think has been the response from people I don't know very well, from the general public, because I really felt that I had to own up to my decision. Not own up to it in a way where like I did so much wrong and now I need to make it right, but own up to it in a way where um, God has blessed me. God has given me another opportunity. God's given me a chance to be a witness to others. And so I could have just, you know, made an announcement saying I'm retiring, or what often happens in this industry is girls just kind of disappear. But I felt like I needed to own up to it, that I needed to not only explain kind of what happened to me and how incredible it was, but also perhaps be a witness to others, perhaps inspire others. I really thought that with the people who followed me, the majority, like I really thought even just with my Twitter account in general, what was going to happen is most people were going to unfollow me, and I was going to be glad for the girls in the industry who didn't unfollow me, because like maybe some of my Catholic content will get into their feed every now and then. But that's not what happened at all. The support has been completely overwhelming. Not necessarily within the porn industry. You know, that kind of played out the way I thought it was going to. And I'm really surprised at the amount of people who haven't unfollowed me. But the support from the Catholic community is something I didn't expect at all. I know that, you know, what I'm doing right now with my life is something that I'm proud of, and that something that makes God proud. And so I don't really need, you know, that um, that kind of gratification from others, but it's really nice to hear. And especially given my past, it's kind of surprising to me how supportive people have been, not just, you know, verbally through messages and that sort of thing, but also, you know, I talk about my struggles giving up my income a lot in my interviews. And um, it's been 4 different people now that after the interview, they've asked me like, well, do you need help finding work? Because like I could help find something for you. And like, that is tremendous. Like I get goosebumps just thinking about it. And actually what I'm doing now for work is I'm making rosaries. And when I was younger, I studied jewelry design, and I decided, you know, I love working from home, and I'd love to not have to give that up. And so I thought I'd, you know, take a stab at making rosaries. And that amount of the support that I've gotten on my shop has been just mind blowing. Given who I was, given the career that I had, I can't believe how many people are asking, you know, like as an adult, yeah, you see me, and your heart is warmed by my conversion story. And so you want to support me, or, you know, you see that I make these really nice rosaries and you want to get one for yourself. That in itself is tremendous. But like I've gotten so many different custom requests for children. Like a guy had me make 10 different rosaries for his 10 kids. And bless him, obviously he's Catholic, he has 10 children. And something like that just really astounds me, that given my past, given who I was, you want me to make a rosary for your child. that's surprising, and that's love, and that's grace, and all of that is just God, God, Mary, St. Clare, all of them, just blessing me with these graces.
Yeah. You mentioned, you said God being proud of you. And so, you talked earlier about just how there was this distance between you and God, and that, you could talk to Mary, but you weren't going to talk to God at the early stages. So obviously, you and God reconcile in a
Yep.
sense, right?
Right.
Not
And
only through the sacrament of reconciliation, but in the sense of I can now pray to God and I accept whatever the tragedy is, and I know you're working there, God. So at what point did that happen, where that relationship with the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit, where that was rectified?
right. We did touch on that before. I forgot to get back to it. And this is really important. So, um, after I got back from Italy, I started going to mass occasionally, but I still, and I was kind of going with this back and forth of like, you can't be both people. Um, but I still had these lingering doubts of, could I really be a Catholic? Like, look at my past. And then also, could I really be a Catholic? I was raised Lutheran. Like, that's, a big part of Lutheranism is anti-Catholic. So then I decided to go to someone more official. I'm not going to be able to make these decisions by myself. So I make an appointment with and decide to see a priest. I sit down with him, and he doesn't ask me anything about really about my past at all. Like it's almost like I kind of question, like, do you know why I'm here? Like, I explained on the phone, but maybe you forgot. He just asks, tell me about your faith. And I start talking, and I'm just like, blah, 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 like all this word vomit just comes out of nowhere, just out of this one question. I tell him about the miscarriages I had, the tragedy I had, the abortion I had, the porn that I did, the alcoholism, like everything just comes out, and I'm crying, and it's a hysterical cry. It's an ugly cry. And he looks at me and he says to me, I want you to remember two things. God loves you, and he doesn't want you to be unhappy. And that's when everything changed. That's when I started crying acceptance, tears, crying gratitude, crying just realization that he's right. And I am so blessed, so lucky. And my tears started to slow, but just tears of joy replaced the ugly crying. And I really haven't stopped crying since. And really, that's when everything changed. It seems like it's so basic or so simple. The idea is that God loves me, and also that he doesn't want me to be unhappy. Not that God wants you to be happy. It's more than that. He doesn't want me to be unhappy. And I realized that it was through this tragedy that he brought me home to the Catholic Church. And I realized that he was patient, as he always is. He worked on me with his ladies, Mary and St. Clare, but he knew that I wasn't ready. And then when I was ready, he was there for me. And I realized that he never stopped loving me. He never let me go. He never was going to let me go. And that's something that I think about every time I'm lucky enough to receive the Holy Eucharist. And the first time I received the Holy Eucharist as a Catholic, I think you said already that I converted and I came into the church this past Easter. And then I was able to receive the Eucharist as a Catholic. And it just meant so much to me, the fact that he never let me go. And that's what I think about every time that I accept the Eucharist is thank you. Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for not giving up on me. And thank you for not for not wanting me to be unhappy. And it still just really gets you.
When you made your first confession,
Oh,
obviously, you confessed all these things. I committed all these sexual sins. I did all these things, whatever. Uh, when you hear the words, "I absolve you from your
oh,
sins," in the
yeah.
confession, like, did you just feel the weight of that sin being
Oh,
removed from you?
yes, it was tremendous. I ended up going, through RCIA and attending that specific church that I met the priest with. And for my first confession, I asked him to do my first confession, and I asked if it could be in his office, which is where I first met him. And mainly I did that because I felt like for my first confession, I I couldn't have a screen. Like that would be cheating in a way. Like I needed to be face to face with him. And I know that I was speaking to God and he's just a conduit, but at the same time I felt like it it needed to be almost like as difficult as possible. Um, and so it happened that my first confession also occurred in his office. And so yeah, that room is really special to me. And it's just full of warmth and forgiveness and mercy. And my first confession was tremendous. I don't see why people don't uh, I mean, are I guess I do. I see why people, aren't always anxious to go to confession, or they'll only do it like, you know, whatever is the minimum requirement. But I love it. I like to remind people that it is a sacrament of healing, and that's what it's intended for. Is it's not intended to make you feel bad. It's intended to help you heal.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great testimony to the power
Mhm.
of confession.
Mhm.
As you enter into the church, as you receive the sacraments now, like, does the past still come back? Does the evil one kind of bring that to the forefront at times and question, like, for you, maybe stirring within you, like, why am I doing this? I'm unworthy. How could, like, are there those doubts that creep in from the evil one? And if so, then how do you combat them?
Certainly. A lot of times I think that one of the one of the ways that Satan really gets to me is he'll put these thoughts in my head of like, I can't do this, I'm not Catholic enough. Um, like when I started wearing a veil to mass. Occasionally I go to the Latin mass where I always wear a veil, and then occasionally I'll go to the Roman Catholic mass and where I only occasionally wear a veil. And then I was like, well, why? And I just I don't feel Catholic enough to wear the veil to the Roman Catholic mass. And then I started thinking like, well, what does that mean exactly? Like and other things where, I feel um kind of like, well, who am I to give advice to people? I'll get those sort of feelings of doubt that creep in because I've again been tremendously blessed with a lot of different people who have messaged me or emailed me or reached out in some way to say how I've inspired them. Or I mean, there's even people who have reached out to say that through specifically my love for Mary on social media has
Mm.
inspired them to convert to Catholicism. Or there are people who've been inspired to stop watching pornography. There's been a few women who've reached out to say that they've been inspired and really want to quit pornography, but they're not exactly sure how. And I've helped them. But there's not always, but sometimes there's these lingering doubts of like, who am I to give advice?
Mm.
Um, who am I even to give an interview? Like, I'm not special. And then how I combat that is really simple. Um, you've heard probably the analogy that of like there are two wolves in every person, and like you can feed one or help one. And I think that analogy is a little confusing. Instead, I think about Jesus and Satan are sitting on the couch and they're watching a movie, which is my life. And I'm helping people. Someone reaches out to me on Twitter, and I'm helping a woman, giving her, what God has given me, and through me, He's reaching this woman, and everything is just transforming amazingly. And then Jesus is sitting on the couch, and He's like, "All right, go Bree," And then I have this lingering doubt of like, who am I? And then Satan's like, yes, I got her again. And and so with this image of these two sitting on the couch, I don't like pleasing Satan. And I realized, like, okay, that thought just pleased him. And above anything, I don't want to please him. And above that, I guess, is I want to please Jesus. I want to make him proud of me. I want to make him, pleased with me. And I think that I'm I'm like the poster child for, Satan's recruits. There's so much sin in my background. There's so much doubt. Um, and, like I said, I've been in therapy, going to see a therapist for the past 2.5 years. But just within the last 3 months, she and I agreed that I could most likely that I would start coming in less. And I know, again, that's just by the grace of God.
Mm.
And I know that a lot of almost everything that I talk about in therapy is, the product of Satan, the product of self-doubt, of these fears that I have. And so, like I say, that I'm I'm the type of person who they're looking for, Satan and his minions. I'm the perfect target, and I don't want to be that anymore. I don't want to be the perfect target, because that really scares me in all actuality. And I want to be the type of person who, God sends to help others, who God is working through, who Mary is working through. And so it's really easy for me to shut those thoughts off. And it's never been easy for me. Like I said, I've been in therapy going once a week for a long time. I've always had these like negative thoughts that come up.
Mm.
But imagining the two of them on the couch, like rooting or like booing, and that helps me tremendously. I don't know if that could help others, but
Yeah, God's using you. God's using your story, inspiring people to choose a life of virtue, to leave behind the vice of sin and such. So, I just think about in the, kind of in the abortion world, and in the pro-life movement, there's an apostolate, I think it's called, and then there were none or something like that. And basically, they help people basically transition out of working at an abortion clinic, helping them find
right.
other work and whatnot. So maybe that's what God's calling you to do, is
Mhm.
to maybe have some sort of apostolate, to could be a shepherdess in a sense of leading people out of that life of the pornography culture, of working in that climate and such, and that you can help them to find God's love and peace and mercy, and just that there's life after porn in a sense.
Right.
So maybe that's where God's calling you in the next steps.
I
I'm not
hope so.
sure, but
Mhm.
when we just following you online, obviously when you go public and you say, I had this experience of conversion, and you said earlier, I could have easily kind of just done this quietly, retired from it, but you knew that God had given you a powerful witness, and so He wants you to make this statement and whatnot. But you have some people out there who are some very strong haters.
Mhm.
They demean you, they vilify you. That I guess why do they mock you? And what do you make of it? How do you respond to it?
Well, one thing that I like to keep in the back of my mind that helps me a lot is the thought process that hurt people hurt people.
Mm.
So, I have to imagine that the majority of people who attack me are just insecure about themselves, or they're hurting themselves, or they're jealous, or they're envious. So thinking like that, thinking of a person, as more than just a comment is really helpful. And then I also think that I've gotten, a lot of skepticism, which is fair. I encourage people to be skeptical. And one of my favorite quotes is actually from Ronald Reagan, which is weird, but he says, "Trust but verify." Or he did say that, and I think that says everything. Like, trust what a person is telling you, but verify to make sure that it's true. And there's one person in particular that she has no trust, and she's verified that everything I say that I've done, I've actually done. I shut down all of my accounts. I'm no longer making any kind of income. I do actually go to mass every Sunday, but um, another thing that I think about is I've had this experience with God. Like, we're communicating. He's working through me. I've reconciled with him. It sounds almost kind of rude, but like, I don't have to answer to people, to human beings.
Yeah.
He's proud of me, and I know that I'm doing now, well, I really hope that I'm doing now, I pray every day that I'm representing him in the way that he wants me to, that I'm allowing him to speak through me. And so, I mean, it's just when you've had such a tremendous transformation like I've had, it affects everything in your life. And things that used to be a really big deal, like somebody talking trash on social media, it's just no longer a big deal.
Mm.
And I understand that people are skeptical, and I understand that, maybe people I don't know, that they themselves are hurting, or that they wish that they could do what I'm doing. But I I'm I answer to God, and the rest is just kind of trivial.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. We don't have to answer to the people around us necessarily. Like,
Yeah.
God is the one that it says in the scriptures that we'll have to give an account of our life to. And so
Right.
obviously there's things in the past we'll have to give an account for, but by the blood of Jesus and his mercy, forgiveness, so much hope as we move forward in this life of faith. So you make rosaries. You mentioned that a little earlier. If someone's out there, they're wanting to support your life and helping you to get back on your feet after really having this conversion experience. Where do they go to buy these rosaries? How do they find your social media presence?
Yeah. So I'm on Etsy, and my store is avemaria.etsy.com. No, excuse me. It's avemariaeveryday.etsy.com. And I've just, this opportunity has been overwhelming. The idea that I can make something that not only helps me, but also helps others to
Mm.
rekindle and also continue their relationship with Jesus and Mary. And people have been so supportive, actually, that I hardly ever have anything in my store. And so I just encourage people that if you don't find anything that you like right now, maybe come back. And also, I do a lot of custom rosaries, which is quite time consuming, but I really like that a lot, making something special for someone
Mm.
with the intention that they're going to have it to pray with for the rest of their lives. And then also, I'm most active on Twitter. You can find me by just doing a search for Miss B Converted. That's probably the easiest way. And I'm also on Instagram. And if you yourself, if one of your listeners, one of your viewers has, if they're struggling with pornography, if anything that I've said, it resonates with them, or if they have a question, or maybe they just want to send me some hate mail, I'm open to that, or love mail. And my email address is missbeconverted@gmail. So
Okay.
please, if anybody would like to reach out and send me a photo of their dog, or, whatever, I'm here.
Well, that's wonderful. So, yeah, definitely. I think people should follow along to see what God continues to do. I can only imagine,
Thank you.
from leaving that life behind, that God is going to continue to do amazing things with you and through you to touch so many hearts. And so, hopefully, this podcast, our conversation today, can be an instrument also in doing just that. So, thanks so much, Bree, for joining me and for having this conversation.
Thank you, Father. It was a delight.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. And don't forget to stay up to date with what Father Edward is doing by following him on Facebook, X, or Instagram at the handle @FREdwardLooney. Thanks for listening, and please join Father Edward again next time for another inspiring conversation.